Okay, hey everybody, and I am finally finishing off the Ultra Guide for the Four Realms character guides. Unfortunately, it took a lot longer to get this video out, but I am finally providing it to you all lovely people. And as always, we are going to lead with the regular standard units and then go into the welfare unit for this class that is Erica, and finally the limiteds. So we're going to start with Liz today, and she is the standard DPS for Ultra, and she is a poison DPS that heavily relies on her first Enlighten to function. And then for end game content, you're really going to want her up to Over Exalt if you want to expect her to do any serviceable amount of damage. And so this tells you that her Corrupted Flames will upgrade into Deadly Flames, and her Corrupted Flames is this damaging card right here. You have this 2-cost card. If it's in your hand or Ultra Space, it transforms into the next version of it, and then the E1 gives you the third version of it. And basically, these are just these are your sources of damage. They're just a poison damaging card, and her Exalt does the same thing. Her Exalt uses them to deal damage. And with her Over Exalt, as you can see, it upgrades them right away for even more damage. But the way this character works, really, is quite simple. You stack up as many of these flame effects cards in your hand as you can. The way to do that is you use this 2-cost card with like multi-hit attacks to add them to your hand, because for each instance of damage you get dealt, you'll get them. And then just putting this card into Ultra Space and then going into Ultra Turn to have a bunch of them in hand, or just chapter mechanics in general. So you have all these different effects to gain the 2-cost card in hand, and then you ideally, really, you Exalt to discard them all and trigger all their effects, and therefore you're not even spend any Aerith to do all the damage with them. And that will apply just a big burst of poison damage to an enemy with a lot of multi-hits. So it can be quite powerful. And so, moving on from a DPS, we now have a support with Tinct. And I should also tell you that that was the only standard DPS, though there is an argument to be made with Jenkins. But with Tinct, excuse me, she is a crit rate and crit damage support. And frankly speaking, no one plays her cards. And the character really wants her in License 3. Because it gives you crit rate, not just crit damage. So it makes her that her kit actually provides you crit rate. And no one really plays her cards. You really only use her for her Exalt that gives you temporary crit rate and crit damage. So that's just temporary damage. And then she reduces the cost of 5 random cards in hand by 1. So that's really her value, is that she'll give you an injection of crit rate and crit damage, and then and then of course reduce the cost of cards in hand. That is basically, if she's on a team, that is what she's doing. Really nothing else. And then Cassia is a very much more complicated unit that I don't have a lot of experience with. I actually don't have any experience with her, if I'm being honest. And so take what I say here with a grain of salt, but basically you want to get her up to Enlighten 3 because you have access to a really strong Aftershock effect on one of her cards. And then you have a very much more powerful effect on her Exalt as well as her main cards. So all 3 of her Enlightens are very important for her kit, and so you want to get all 3. because she actually does have a lot of cards she wants to play. Her Exalt draws 4 cards, which is just amazing. General card draw Exalts like this are all really good, and the fact that it's a consistent draw 4 is very strong. Her Poof card also draws cards. It does an effect called Wheeling. If you've played card games, you would know what it is, but basically you're replacing your hand with a new one. And it also just can give a lot of alienness back to her, which allows you to, draw more cards. And then finally, her telekinesis is said to be a tutor effect from card games, where she's able to grab a card that's in Ultra Space and also reduces cost. So she just provides a lot of card draw to the team and is very self-sustaining as well with the Poof card. So extremely powerful supportive kit right there. And lastly, we have Jenkins, who can be considered a DPS early game, especially with her most important Enlighten, which is her first Enlighten. And what this does is that for each use of her 1-cost card, it's going to increase the damage of her big damage card, which is this derived card from the Mises symbol. Because this X-cost card will create a 1-cost card that does multiple instances of damage. It's relatively low damage, but does multiple instances of damage. And each time you play the Get Him Brown, that card is going to have way more damage. But that is nice as for a bit of early game damage, but it falls off very quickly. And what's really good about her kit is these effects, her Rouse and her Exalt, where you get temporary crit damage from the Exalt, you get temporary crit damage from the Rouse. And even here with level 1 skills, because I recently put her into the Black Pool, just because she doesn't really fit the teams that I use, they still can give up to over 100% crit damage. So she's a very strong DPS up support in endgame content. And so that's it for the standards. It's very simple. Oh, I actually forgot about Winkle. Winkle really needs her Enlighten 3, and she is, in my opinion, the best standard support in Ultra. And this Enlighten 3, what it does is that it allows you to Exalt twice in a turn. So not with her cards, mind you, but what her Exalt does is that it gives an influx of an insane amount of alien miss, insanely high alien miss. It's at max level 50 alien miss, so half an Exalt is just being handed to your characters. And you can then also do 2 Exalts in a turn with a character. So someone like Kath, who wants to Exalt to draw her cards, play all her cards out, and then Exalt again to redraw them, really loves this type of effect, and just in general, it's a very powerful effect. And then her Energy Beam recharges her Exalt if you play it as the first card per turn, and it can also be used to remove Barrier and inflict a turn of weakness. And so those are really the effects she's used for. Nothing else in her kit really has much use, but these effects in themselves are just extremely powerful. And now that is it for the standards. So I did go a little fast for these, but that is truly because the standards in Ultra are all very weak and not very weak, but they all have very simple to not a lot of execution. The real power in Ultra comes from its limited. They have some of the most powerful limited Awakers in the game, except for Wanda, which I will get to in a moment. But first, we need to talk about Erica. Erica, the only things you need to know about Erica's kit is that her Exalt is one of the best in the game. It gives you crit rate, crit damage, and applies a turn of weakness of Vuln. So it also gives a decent amount of shield as well when it's max leveled. So her Exalt does basically everything. And then her 0-cost card is miserable. I actually despise her zero cost card. I would recommend getting just one copy of Erica and using that till the end of time, because I very much dislike this zero cost card because her first Enlighten will give it that it puts one of her strikes or defense into your hand. And in my opinion, just adding a strike or a defense to your hand is, generally speaking, just the equivalent of adding a symptom into your hand. It's not very good. But that Exalt that does basically everything right there is, as a support, is extremely good as a support of Exalt. Her only issue being that she struggles to charge it back. She struggles to charge it. And now for the actual power level characters, we have Wanda, who's one of the earliest limiteds in this game. I believe she's like the third, maybe even the second. And she's all about counter and this mechanic called Dream Leers. So she's actually really weak and expensive unit, right? 4 cost card, 3 cost card, right? But what she does, basically, is that she stacks counter and reduces strength. So this card gives her counter and reduces the enemy's strength. This card gives her damage when you have a bunch of counter, and it will also deal damage reducing the enemy's strength. And then her Exalt is actually really cool, especially if you have her in License 3, because then you have all these Dream Lair stacks, she's been trying to stack these Dream Lair stacks. So if you have enough Dream Lair stacks, and in this case it's 5, you can do an effect where you're doubling the number of attacks you're taking, but they're only doing like 40% or 30% damage, because you cut the damage by a bit, and then also there's going to be the strength. She adds a strength down effect as well, so you get so much strength down on this character, and gain a bunch of like permanent counter, that you can potentially do these really funny shenanigans where you're getting hit for like 20 attacks, but that all are doing like 0 damage to you. That, however, is only really with a truly willed out Wanda. In generalized play, she is one of the weakest limiteds in the game, and by far the weakest limited in Ultra. Because then Ultra has Daffodil, right? And so Wanda gives you like permanent counter, but only a few hundred at a time, maybe like 1,000 max. And so near the end of the fight, you have like 10k base counter, right? Daffodil is the other Arc 1 DPS in Ultra, and she really wants her E2 minimum so that she can stack permanent crit rate whenever she kills something. Or she wants her Over Exalt because she generates these cards called Thousand Mirages. And what that is it's a customized card that has a bunch of bonus effects, but most importantly, when you first get a choice, it has a choice of doing poison equal to its damage, temporary counter equal to its damage, or like more base damage, something like that. I always forget the last effect because I haven't actually tested her too much. But what this allows for you to do is that instead of gaining like 20k counter at the end of a fight, you are on like turn 2 generating 40k or like 60k counter. And that is enough to just kill most enemies. And if you don't want to build a counter team with Daffodil, you can do a poison comp, because she can also do poison damage, and then you run like her with like Lily or G-Doll, and then you're just stacking a lot of poison on an enemy with these generated cards. And so that's her whole shtick, is that she's able to generate all these cards, and then she has her own source of vulnerable for her damage, and then the rest of her is just like damage scalings with the stacking crit rate and all that. You also really do kind of want this E2, because it will increase her strength gain. but it is less relevant. I mean, or E3, I should say, but it is less relevant than the rest of her stuff. And that truly is just the long and short of her kit, is that you're trying to create these cards with her Exalt. You're just building these cards that you're then putting into the Ultra space, because in Ultra turn you'll be able to play multiple of them in a single turn, or you can grab it with Cassia, Telekinesis, and stuff like that. So you're just trying to play a bunch of those as much as possible and manipulate Ultra space as well. And then finally, we have Horla. And if you watched my videos in the past, I have given an in-depth description of what Horla's kit does. And in a sense, I was flaming her for it. But if you like, you could always check out that video. Just know, watching it, Horla got buffed so that her stats are no longer awful, and she is a genuinely solid unit now because of it. But as a short summary, she needs her Enlighten 1 to function, and her Enlighten 2 has niche value, but it can also be very crippling for you as well. And I personally do not value it. But you definitely need to get her up to Enlighten 1, so you have Vuln and Weakness on her cards. Otherwise, she truly does not contribute to the team. And what her kit does is that you have these 4 cards, and each of them, the leap effect will put you into a different stance. And the main ones you care about are the Carol Psalm's Joy stance, which will give you retain on all your cards and on your Aerith as well. And you can use, and it also increases Alien Misgen, and that's the important part, because you can use that on teams like Caster or Sangha, who really just care about exalting as much as physically possible, and increase their Alien Gen by a lot that way. Otherwise, you can run the Elegy Psalm mode with characters like Kath and Caster to increase their shielding per turn. But the most common way and simplest way to use her, and in my opinion the most efficient way to use her, is just to use that Snarl Psalm to apply Vuln, to go into her Anger stance, which increases the damage you're dealing, because I should say the Elegy Psalm applies weakness, and her puts you in a Grief stance, which increases the shielding you have. And that's why it's good for like Salvador, Kath, Caster, because more defensive strength. And then the Snarl Psalm puts you into a damaging stance that just increases your final damage multiplier, and also applies a stack of Vuln. And obviously, Vuln, weakness, very powerful effects. And so you just put her into that stance, and now you're just doing more damage during a fight. And so that's going to be really good on teams where you don't really care too much about what your other units are doing, and it just, all that matters really is buffing your team's damage, which once again is going to be good with Caster and Kath. That's where I mainly use her, and Gellet, for example, as well, who basically has a 3-character team and really is just looking for a filler 4 slot. And because that's really what her kit does, is that she's a stance-based filler character that can go anywhere but is not truly amazing anywhere. And the last thing that really is notable about her is her Exalt, because her Rouse is completely useless. But her Exalt will have different effects based on which stance she's in. And so her Angry stance will, for example, give you 20% crit rate and crit damage for the turn. And then her Weakness will give you a decent amount of heal. And her Joy stance will give you a decent amount of Alien Miss, depending on what. So that is also a consideration when using her kit. It is unfortunate that despite having all these potential toolbox effects, she really tends to boil down to go into one specific mode and almost never change it. And if that mode is Anger, it truly is never change it. And that was it for the Arc 1 Limiteds. And now we go to the Arc 2 Limiteds, which brings us to like literally 3 of the best units in the game. The more people play, the more we are learning how powerful these units are. And so the first one in release dates was Clementine. And so what does Clementine do? Put simply, everything. She, first off, you're really going to want her up to E3. Once you have her at Enlighten 3, she is extremely powerful. She's absurdly powerful because for Exalt. And that is what these all really synergize with. Her E1 is to me, her most important Enlighten. If you get her to at least E1, she will be functional. But for true endgame power, you really want her at E3. And that is because this basically just buffs her Exalt. I will explain in what way in a minute, but this basically buffs her Exalt to be very powerful. Otherwise, it's not powerful at all. And then this E2 is very good for buffing her Exalt as well. It just gives her even more damage and Keyflare regeneration, which Keyflare is a very valuable stat. It's one of the best stats in the game. You always want more Keyflare. And then this last one as well is for buffing her Exalt. So what exactly is her whole Exalt in her kit? Well, her Exalt is that you have this like passive buff that you generate by dealing damage or through like her Enlightens. But every instance of damage gives you like one of the buff, and her Enlightens give you at the beginning multiple stacks of the buff as well. And what she does is that she transfers that in the form of a debuff onto all the enemies which she exalts, which will give them that they apply either take more damage per stack for the turn or deal less damage per stack. And so she very easily increases the amount of damage you're doing in a turn by if you literally just start the turn by start a turn by exalting, you'll start a fight by exalting 15%. So that's already a pretty good. And the exalt itself does a significant chunk of damage and give you a significant amount of Keyflare. Her Arouse card is very simple. She basically triple plays all her cards. It triple plays the first card you play for the turn. So her Arouse is very, very powerful and very beloved by the community. And then what's good about those triple playing is that you can triple play her Strike, which will give you 3 stacks of the buff and just charge up her Exalt. You can triple play her Soul Salve, which is a 2-cost card that will give you a lot of healing if you do so, reduce the damage you're taking by a decent amount as well, and cleanse any madness that might be affected by whatever. So, for example, if you're playing against Cat or Blesser, who have madness, you can temporarily get rid of that. And then her last card, it's not really too relevant. It's just a 3-cost that gives you a decent amount of damage and prepare, but it has prepare. So you can just hold on to it for a little bit and then use it whenever you really care for it. And she's also just one of the better strength stackers in this game. Because at my level, for example, it gives me 25 permanent strength whenever I use her leap effects on her cards. So that's also another reason why she's so powerful. The TLDR on this kit basically being that she does everything pretty well. That's not applying vulnerable weakness, and it's instead a pseudo-vuln and pseudo-weakness for a turn. And if you do want to get her up to Overexalt, her Overexalt is very good as well, because her Overexalt has increased Exalt damage and applies both effects. So if you truly do wish to have like the best Clementine or like the best Ultra team, having her Overexalt can be quite useful for that. And so next in the release date order is Caster. And Caster is one of the best DPS in the game. Though, admittedly, I am of the opinion that he falls off a little compared to some of the more recent ones. But the community at large will tell you that he is one of if not the best DPS in the game. And he requires Enlighten 3 for as to be a DPS. Before then, a lot of the community will tell you that he is a good shielder at E0, at no Enlightens, at no copies. They're lying to you. They're lying to you. They're trolling you. It's messed up. If you want to play this character, he has to have at least Enlighten 2. If you want to play this character, you want him to have at least Enlighten 2. Why? His whole character is built around these cards called Onyx Plumes, and his Enlighten 1 starts you an Onyx Plume, and then his second Enlighten will allow his 2-cost card, which I will explain, to give you Alien Miss. To charge up his Exalt, which you'll realize in a minute why that's so relevant, especially as a shielder. And then, other than that, the reason why he's only a DPS at Enlighten 3 and higher is because that's when he gets infinite scaling, and like he actually does damage, basically. You could also get him up to Overexalt, because his Overexalt's also very powerful for his kit, since it gives him just three more plumes than he would normally gain. And so any amount of increased plume generation is very, very good on this character. And now, for what does he do? Well, his Exalt is just a lot of shield and 3 plumes added to the deck. His Quasar effect, which is like the leap effect, and Clementine also has the Quasar, not a leap, is where but truthfully the differences are nuance at best. His Quasar effects, every single one of them, is that he shuffles an Onyx Plume into the deck. His Rouse is that the Onyx Plumes do increased damage and apply a debuff. And then his Umbral Flight, his 3-cost card, gets cost reduced when you play plumes. And then his Stygian Wing, his 2-cost card, will give you Alien Miss based off the number of plumes you have in hand. And so you notice, I have just told you that this character's kit, basically, is literally all built around this plume card. I have not explained what the plume card is yet. And so, it is very simple, actually. It is a 0-cost card that can sit in your hand permanently, because as retain. And then when it sits in your hand for a turn and you end the turn, you get shielding. And so it allows you to just stall for a very long time while you're just building up more and more copies of these plumes that your whole kit is built around. And so how Caster plays is very simple because of this, is that he just sits there for a couple turns, stacks up a number of plumes, and then you want to use just enough plumes to kill the enemies that you're playing into. Because if you use all your plumes and you don't manage to kill, then you're shot out of luck and you have no shielding or anything. But as you can probably tell, he's a very selfish unit, and you don't really play a lot of other cards besides his. However, it is notable that you need to have at least one sub DPS on your team. Usually it's a Jenkins because it increases the crit damage that you do. And the reason why you want this sub DPS is because he also applies corrosion, this corrosion debuff. And the corrosion debuff is something that he cannot proc on his own. But if you have a sub DPS to proc it, you just get a lot more bonus damage that way. So I said it's usually Jenkins, but recently that role has been taken over by Pollux, because Pollux is also a DPS. However, he does not need to be paired with Caster. He's also very strong DPS on his own, just like Caster. And his kit's very similar to Caster's in a lot of ways, because he also really requires his E3 to function. Because he's built around a card called Sacred Hearts that basically buff all the cards he plays. And the Sacred Heart buff will also allow him to double play a card when it's exhausted, when the Sacred Heart uses its effect. When you have him at E3. Otherwise, the Sacred Heart is just a buff and it's not double playing the card. And then you also just want him for the other Enlightened effects as well. Like, you always want to start a battle with a Sacred Heart. And then you also want to gain more Alien Miss for his Exalt, and and also reduce the cost of his 3-cost card. So because like that, all these effects are very powerful as well. And then I'm told his Overexalt is one of the best in the game, and yeah, his Overexalt is also, if you can get him up to Overexalt, you're not gonna regret it. He's also an extremely powerful Overexalt unit. So those are all the things that make him similar to Caster. Well, also he's very similar to Caster in his playstyle, because what he does is that he exalts, which will buff cards, and then you play his cards, and yeah. But what his cards do are actually kind of simple. It's actually kind of simple for how much text is on here. When you exalt, or when you play a Sacred Heart 3 times, and a Sacred Heart is this 1-cost card that gets shoveled to the top of the deck when you play it, your next card is empowered by just his special empowerment buff. And so your defenses will give you thousands of shields. Not like thousands, but you can easily get up to thousands of shields with your defenses. Your Soul Searching Lights will do way more damage, but you don't really want to use it on the Soul Searching Light, because this is a card that is used to just draw cards and set up. What you really want to use it on is Strikes for charging a ton of Alien Miss, or his Cleansing Judgment, which is his big damage card, where you'll just do a lot. I really can't put it any more calmly than that. When you play this card, you will do a lot of damage, and you will apply a lot of bleed. He is one of the best bleed stackers in the game, and honestly probably the best bleed stacker in the game, if I'm being if anything, because he has a passive that is not mentioned really right here. You have to like kind of look around for it. I believe it's in his talents. Yeah. He has a passive basically that says when he does damage, he applies bleed. And then he has these sin marks that you try to stack up to apply more bleed, but really, if you want to apply more bleed, just get more damage. And so the way this guy's loops go for gameplay is that you want to have a bunch of Sacred Hearts from generated through like Exile and stuff, but the way you want to play them is you want to play a Sacred Heart, and then normally this is where Caster would come in, where you would plume, so you could play the Sacred Heart again, and then draw in the plume again, well, the Sacred Heart again with another plume. But really, what you can do without Caster is have multiple Sacred Hearts, set them up by playing multiple ones in a turn, and then draw them the next turn, play them again, use a draw posse like the Pollux Posse, which will draw the top card of your library and give you an Aerith, to then play that plume again, not plume, play that Sacred Heart again to finally exhaust it, and then play like a Cleansing Judgment or defense if you want the shielding, or even a strike is still good. And then that process is obviously sped up if you have like a Soul Searching Light, which can easily draw your Sacred Heart and such. And so that's really it for Ultra. They are a very complicated looking class at first, but really it boils down to just applying debuffs and dealing damage. And so if you want to play this, you get access to some of the most powerful characters and effects in the game, as well as the most powerful mechanic in the game, in the Ultra mechanic. So I hope more than any of the other guides I've posted previously, I hope this one will prove to be the most useful, despite ironically being the shortest. And then I hope you guys enjoyed.